And so I've had to try to get to know every single part of the project, try to get to know every single partner, try to work in this world that I know you're familiar with, all of us are. Maybe you haven't thought about it quite this way, but it's responsibility without authority, because only a certain number of people actually directly report to me. Many other people report up in their own organizations where there are other priorities.
Hello and welcome to the Leadership Launchpad, where we help technical managers improve themselves, their teams, and their organizations. If you are a technical leader, an engineer or technician looking to become a leader, or someone who supports technical leaders, this is the show to get actionable insights from people who have been in the trenches and successfully made the transition to managing people. Our guest today is Lindy Elkins-Tanton, a professor at UC Berkeley, director of the Berkeley Space Sciences Laboratory, and lead of the NASA Psyche mission. Regular listeners may remember our recent episodes with Matt Galich and Chapman Snowden from Astroforge, who are building a company to mine asteroids. Well, Psyche is doing a lot of the science to prove that is possible, being the first space mission to go into orbit around and deeply study a metal-rich asteroid. Launched in 2023, the mission has absolutely had its ups and downs, hitting critical phases during COVID, going through the stress of a one-year launch delay. All of those ups and downs are detailed in Lindy's new book, Mission Ready: How to Build Teams That Perform Under Pressure. Lindy was previously a vice president at Arizona State University, director of the Department of Terrestrial Magnetism at the Carnegie Institute for Science, and faculty at MIT. So she has certainly had her fair share of having to organize and lead highly technical people. And you can tell that by just how clearly she explains such complex topics in her book. So with all that introduction, Lindy, welcome to the Leadership Launchpad. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Matt. It's great to be here. And I'm having a great day. And I hope that you all are too.
Yes, I think I'm having a great day. I hope our listeners are having a great day. I am doubly having a great day because we are going to get to chat today. So to start off, just for anybody who doesn't know a lot about the Psyche mission, there's two things I'd love for you to cover. I gave a little bit of a primer, but give a little bit more info on what the mission is, what the goal is. And then I honestly had never heard of the role of principal investigator. So tell me a little bit more about that role.
Yeah, you bet. Okay. So think about both the crewed and the robotic space missions that humans have sent off of this Earth. And we've sent them to bodies made of rock, like Mercury and Venus, and of course the Moon and Mars, and great big ice and gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and the icy moons. But a kind of body that humans have never visited is one with a metal surface. And that's what we think this asteroid 16 Psyche is. We think that it is largely made of metal and that it has a partially metal surface. So it's a new kind of exploration, which is what makes me so excited about it. It's like primary exploration of a new kind of object. There aren't that many new kinds of objects or places that people haven't been and looked. We don't even have photographs of this asteroid. So everyone on Earth, we're all going to figure out what it is at the same time. Our best guess is that it was originally part of a planetesimal, as we call it, a little planet that formed very, very early in the solar system. And most of them became the material that joined together and made our big rocky planets. But some parts of them got stranded in the asteroid belt. It's kind of like the leftover shrapnel from planet building. And we think this might be part of the metal core of one of those planetesimals. So just like Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and the Moon even has a little metal core on the inside. And for us on Earth, it's the origin of our magnetic field, a key to habitability, and also completely unreachable. And so this is the one way, if indeed this is what this asteroid is, this is the one way humans will ever get to see a metal core. So that's what the mission is about. And as you say, we launched in 2023 on a beautiful SpaceX Falcon Heavy. And today, right now, this is our 1,000th day in space on our cruise.
Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an exciting day for the mission. And we will get to the asteroid in 2029, and we'll be sharing our photos as we do already. We share the photos on a raw photo feed with no censorship or editing within a half hour of our receipt from the Deep Space Network, so we can all look at once. So then, what is a principal investigator? It's a term that comes, I think, mostly from grants, federal grants. The person who leads the grant is the principal investigator, and in this case, that term has been borrowed for a contract. And so the competed missions that NASA gives of all different sizes, when teams have to compete and try to win them, the leader of the team is called the principal investigator, and that person is a scientist. And so that was my role starting in 2011 when we had the idea we might try for this, all the way through the competition, 2.5 years of competition, starting in 2014 against 27 other teams. It was like the Super Bowl toward the end, because our budget is over $1.2 billion. And the industry partners, in our case, Maxar, which is now Intuitive Machines West, and our NASA partnered Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and the rest of our partners, I mean, everything's on the line. Hundreds of people's jobs for 15 years. It's a big deal. So we competed all that time, and then we were selected in 2017, changed all of our lives forever. And I've stayed on as principal investigator. My job is fundamentally to make sure that when we get to that asteroid, we'll be able to do our science. And so I've had to try to get to know every single part of the project, try to get to know every single partner, try to work in this world that I know you're familiar with, all of us are. Maybe you haven't thought about it quite this way, but it's responsibility without authority, because only a certain number of people actually directly report to me. Many other people report up in their own organizations where there are other priorities. And my job is to keep everybody running down the same track toward the same vision.
Yeah, it's really, I was just a couple of days ago having a conversation about the role or the idea of a responsible engineer that's gaining a lot of traction in a lot of companies. And I think very often it puts the role or even the mindset of a responsible engineer is very much about that leading without authority, because you're taking responsibility beyond just your solid line relationships, because
Yes.
you have to truly take responsibility.
That is so exactly right. And I actually think the way you put that is so important for every human. That's what I would like to see every human do in their own lives, to realize that to be a leader, you don't need people who report to you. You need a vision, and you need values and a way of being, and you need to take responsibility for everything that you see around you and understand that you have the agency to make change. So that's exactly what you're teaching is what I hope for everyone.
Just a quick interjection. I wanted to remind you that I run a company called Built, where we train the next generation of hard tech leaders how to build teams capable of solving the world's hardest problems. If you are an aspiring technical leader, an existing leader, or responsible for training leaders in your organization, please check out builtleaders.com to see if we can support you and your team. To dive into more of what we're going to be talking about today, which is around leadership, we had a great discussion before we hit record. So I know we're very aligned and passionate about just how challenging this is. I want to go back in time a little bit for you, you know, when you first started leading people, because I think that's really interesting. It's such an interesting transition, especially for people who are deep in a technical world where they spend tons of time honing a skill, and they make that transition. What was your first time managing people, and kind of what surprised you? What challenges did you face during that transition?
I had a life-altering surprise in that period of time. I had led small teams or worked on projects in high school and in college, but it wasn't until I finished my undergraduate and my master's in geology and geochemistry. So I was doing high pressure temperature laboratory experiments and analyzing data and learning all about the natural world and how you try to stay objective as you understand your data, as creatively interpret it as you possibly can. It's a very creative endeavor, but you can't change it. The data is the data, and what's happening in the natural world is what's happening in the natural world. And so then I took a job as a management consultant, which was with what was then called Touche Ross, and it's now Deloitte. And I was the junior person on the team, of course. I didn't even have an MBA. And we were working, interestingly enough, with a big aerospace company. And we were trying to help them fix a bunch of problems they had in their production line. They were working on the CH-47 helicopters. And familiar to so many of us. And so the management that I was working with on our team, we did this huge study about the way they were running things, and then we located the flaws, and then we began to imagine here would be a better way for the teams to work together. And if they communicated this way, and these people talked this way every day, and if they kept their records over here, then this problem would be solved. And then we went to the management of the aerospace company and showed them what we wanted to do and convinced them to do it that way. And then it happened. And that's when my mind was blown, because in science, you can't go, in my mind, I would like the world to be this way. And if everyone agrees, then it's that way. That's not how it works. But with people, it is how it works. Our culture, the way we work together, the things we do together is it's a contract. It's imaginary, and we hold it in our minds. And that is what blew my mind. And that's the moment when I realized that how people work together is the secret to everything, and it's the hardest thing.
Yeah. That's such an interesting situation that you had, an experience that you had, because of that last phrase you said, it worked or it happened. Because that's the challenge with consulting, is like, so many of these things are like, oh, you can do this and you can do that. And you're right. It just takes imagination and a vision.
Right.
But so often people get so focused on, but this is the way it is. And so much of leadership is about, yes, but, what could we do?
Right. There's yes and there's yes but, and those are the things that we have to say. And I do think, I wonder what you think. I think a lot of it comes down to fear. People are comfortable with how they do it right now, even if it's not right. It's much safer to say, this isn't working, it's somebody else's fault, than is to say, I'm going to go out of my comfort zone and try a whole new thing, and I might fail publicly. But boy, if we're not willing to do that, nothing gets better. Do you think it comes down to fear a lot of times?
I do. I mean, you think about but I want to be careful when I say that, because ultimately so much comes back to human psychology. And just based on evolution, we're going to be designed to, we grew up in a scarce world. And so our psychology is primed to believe that things are scarce, and that I'm going to lose my job and I'm not going to be able to pay for this. I think that's a lot of what we see with the fear of AI, is like, but I've been doing this thing. This is how I make a life. And what if it goes away? And that's where, so much of the role of a leader is to try to create a space where you can get past that fear or not feel that fear.
And the courage and comfort that come with taking action towards something that matters, instead of hunkering down and being afraid. And that's really the leadership that gives permission to go into that other space.
I'd be interested to go a little bit farther on this, of what your experiences have been of that fear. Because one of the things, my formative experience in aerospace and in leadership and development was at SpaceX, and I've interviewed some of the previous folks there. And one of the things that I always ask is, how do you get people to talk about problems openly and surface them? We're going to talk a little bit about this later too. And they almost, in such a small area like SpaceX, sometimes I feel like they don't necessarily have a good answer, because by virtue of kind of how SpaceX is known and the hiring process and the rigor and everything, it's just like the people who are there don't have that fear. And so it's just like, hey, we just talk about it. It's not something. How common is that fear in your experience when you're working in other organizations? And is it usually something that does need to get past?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's pervasive. I think for the same attitude of scarcity, if you think about the leader of a kind of boots on the ground team that's doing something, that person probably feels like they're not in the most stable position in the world, that they want to keep that job or they want to move up, and they're not sure if the people above them will really approve it if they do something kind of crazy. And if they fail, if they give people under them a chance, and it doesn't work out, are they going to be okay? And so then that leader of that group is unlikely to wholeheartedly support the people on the team to say when things are wrong, or to really try things that are crazy and might fail. Might succeed wildly, but could fail because of the threat to their own position. And so anytime there's a little hesitancy on the part of the leadership to listen or to accept or to risk, then for sure the team is not going to feel safe to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect transition to the next thing I wanted to talk about with you, because from reading the book and then also just like listening to you recently, the absolute favorite quote that I have from you is, the best news is bad news delivered early.
Yeah.
I want you to unpack that a little bit more of kind of what that means, and then I think it ties into exactly what we were just talking about of how do you create a culture where that's possible.
Yeah, I just think this is the most important thing. So the best news is bad news delivered early enough to fix it. When you think about the problem with a spacecraft that we're going to launch off this Earth and is never going to experience a repair person again. Maybe you can change the software, you can try different switches, but you can't physically touch it and fix it again ever. And it has to work flawlessly for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And so you better fix the thing before it launches. And this motto for our mission, for Psyche mission, came about in one of our standing review board meetings. So when a mission's selected, NASA gives them a standing review board, and we go through this review process. It's a standard engineering kind of review process, and we meet the board regularly over quite a number of years until we launch. And my philosophy in those meetings, I tried really hard to get us always to show up at those reviews with a very fixed agenda, which was, we can talk about all the things that are going well. Here are the things that are going well, but maybe we don't need to talk about that. Here are the places where we're having challenges. This is what we've tried so far. What do you guys think? Let's take advantage of this review board. And there's a lot of nervousness about giving reviews that way because it shows weakness. You could be seen as vulnerable, in trouble, trotting out your issues instead of hiding them. But these reviews are not supposed to be marketing pieces. They're there so the board can help you.
Yes.
And the minute you say to a tangential team, here's the thing we're trying, we haven't solved it yet, what do you think? Then you're all solving the problem together. And that's what we should be doing. We all want to make the spacecraft fly. This is not a competition anymore. And so that's when we started saying that as our motto. We really want the bad news early so that we can fix it. And wow, I've really thought about this so much. How do you get that bad news in time?
That's the thing. That's the hardest part. It's great to have a motto on the wall, but
how do you make it work? This is your life, right? How do you actually instantiate this? How do you make it happen? And to me, the primary function of a team is to identify and solve problems. That's what a team has to be doing all the time, no matter what project they're on. That's their number one job. And so, is it you or me who is going to know what the problem is? Probably not. Probably we're getting our information second or third hand. And that's famously one of the biggest problems for CEOs or presidents is they get their information like sixth hand and they're surrounded by yes people and they never know what's really going on unless they're really smart about it. So who really knows what the problems are? The most junior people on the team. The people actually soldering the wire, actually writing the line of code. The people who usually are not listened to. So how do you make a culture so that person can speak up the minute that they know there's a problem? And a lot of what we've done on Psyche Team is just talk about this exact issue. Just socialize it, as we say. Socialize the idea that when someone asks a question, the person with the authentic hands-on knowledge should answer it. Not me, unless it happens to be exactly my own thing. So turn to that person. And if a person says, I have something I need you to hear, then you greet that with gratitude and you welcome it. And there's not even a hint of shoot the messenger and you please tell me what's going on. I want to hear what you have to say. Everybody is there for a reason, for their expertise. And so everyone deserves respect. Trying to really level the team, end status signaling, stop having the single loud voice be always the single loud voice. Those are the kinds of things we try to do. And I'll just say, briefly, I think we were about 80% successful with this team. At peak, what were we at peak? 800 people, I think. And now we're about 250 people. So it's a big team. And we're about 80%, I think, successful. And one of the places where we were not successful in hearing those voices is actually what caused our launch to slip for a year. It was really one of the most painful lessons ever. And it was totally a failure of that culture.
How does that... whether it's that specific instance or just speaking more broadly, what are the most common reasons that fails, where that good culture doesn't take root? Is it usually just the manager not setting the right tone? Are they not setting the right tone in the right way? Like how do those things most commonly break down?
Mm. Well, I can say in this case, I mean, it's really heartbreaking, Matt. I'm sure you've seen this before. Every single person is working to their limit. Every
Yes.
single
Yes.
person is absolutely trying to do their best. Every person understands what quality is, and yet you can still fail. And this is one of the
Yes.
ways that you can fail. We ended up with a kind of game of telephone where the manager of that particular group wasn't super comfortable hearing this news and kind of challenged the team to prove that they weren't going to make their deadline instead of really
Yeah.
listening deeply and sympathetically and understanding it. And then the news would kind of filter up, well, they're not hitting their metrics, but I think we're going to catch up, which is a very different message to what it ended up
Very
being,
different.
which is we cannot get to our launch date. That is a very
Yeah.
different message. And
Yeah.
so there's that kind of that fear and that awful hopefulness. When everyone is working 7 days and, missing their kids' soccer games, nobody wants to even think that it's possible that we're not going to make our launch. It's just unacceptable. And so getting past those are all emotional barriers. And then finally, I think status signaling, and a lack of humility is a problem that everybody in our world has to fight against. And I think that plays a role too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with both of those because
You
I
must
think
have
a lot
seen
about.
this. Like, yeah, what would you add? What would you add?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely think it's. I think the biggest one thing that you didn't mention, I would agree with everything you said in terms of what breaks it is ironically the opposite of the pessimism that we talked about earlier, and it's like optimism.
Yeah.
It's like we are really we're really good at saying, I know, but my project's different.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we can catch up. We can get it done. There's a
Yes.
famous story from Daniel Kahneman where he and a group of people were gonna write a textbook together. They were all experts in their field. They're gonna write a college textbook, and they think, oh, it's gonna take us a year. We're gonna do it in a year, and they ask, and everybody's like, you're not going to do it in a year. Like on average it takes 5 years, and it often takes longer. And they're like, no, but this is going to be different. And they try to do it, they work on it, they're working on it, and it ended up taking them 8 years to
8
finish the
years. There
book.
you go. There you go.
If I'm remembering correctly. And these are people who their whole job is studying cognitive bias.
Right.
And
Right.
they
Right.
missed their own cognitive bias
Such
of
a great example.
yeah. And so I think that optimism of we can do it is another challenge, and that's where that's why being a leader is so hard, is because you constantly have to shift between, am I the optimist or am I the pessimist? Like in this situation,
Yeah.
who do I need to be for this team to make sure
Yeah.
we arrive
Yeah.
at the correct solution?
Yeah. I think that's really critical. I think if you're a cynic or a pessimist, I mean, please just stay home because
Yeah.
frankly, that's a pretty lazy way to go through life. Just being able to say, "Oh, this will never work," and we know people like that, and it's very lazy. And so I would say you always have to believe it can be done, and also be realistic about your challenges in front of you. And I think that example you gave is so great. And I've been quite fascinated by people's inability to set appropriate margins. This aerospace project is we're going to just pile 30% of budget margin because we're early on, and we're going to give 30% of schedule margin because we're early on. And I think there's some statistics that show that these are reasonable for projects like this. And are getting better when there really are predecessor projects that are just the same, but mostly like ridiculously over optimistic. And great studies done on mega projects. And apparently the absolute worst for blowing through budget and schedule are Olympics, the absolute worst. And it's for the same bias, because everyone thinks, well, there've been all these Olympics before us and we can just use them as a template. But every Olympics is actually fundamentally different in enough ways that they're not good templates. And so every single one goes wildly over schedule and budget for that same reason of bias.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, and I'm really fascinated. One of the key things that I think about right now, any company that is kind of moving ahead faster than others, I think Stoke Space is one in our world right now. NVIDIA is in another industry. I'm always looking like, how are they doing it? And they all have different methods for trying to short circuit some of those communication channels. Jensen Huang famously has 50 direct reports as the CEO, which I'm not saying that's the best thing to do, but for him, that's his hack to make sure as many people as possible get information directly from him, and he gets it
Yes.
directly from them.
Yes.
And so it's like there's a lot of ways to do it, but you got to find a way to do it.
You really do. And I think communication is just about the hardest thing. People think they're too busy to listen, but then it turns out the thing they didn't hear was the thing they needed to hear, or they're in a real crunch and they're all panicking and they did hear it, but then they forgot it immediately and then you need to tell them again. So you need it up and down and also across in the organization. And it's something that I struggle with all the time, trying to figure out how to reach people in a way that they'll hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of on that note, that might link to this last thing that I wanted to ask you about. And I wanted to ask you about the challenges that COVID presented to Psyche. And the reason why I want to ask it is because I think one thing that's happening a lot of places, I'll just say my experiences of seeing, a lot of companies in California grow up is like you start as this small company where you're kind of figuring out the engineering, you're figuring out the solution, and everybody's together. Everybody's in this one building, this one place.
Yeah.
And then you need to grow. You need to manufacture. And chances are you're not manufacturing it in California. You're going to Nevada, you're going to North Carolina, you're going somewhere. And so all of a sudden, this team that was successful because they were all right together, now they're dispersed. And, that's a more intentional thing that often happens in companies, but you had it just forced on you, where COVID happened in this critical phase.
Yes.
Yeah. What were some of the lessons that you draw of like how to keep people together when they can't be together?
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah. In the example that you gave, we had a couple of advantages over that. Because in the example you gave, I think that's one of the most difficult moments in a company's history. And, I work with some VCs and some startups, and I've had a startup of my own. I've been through that. And what happens in that moment when that original band of brothers, and sisters, but I'm just like emotionally disbands, is that the people that they're then working with in other organizations don't have the same vision. And the people in other organizations didn't figure out the problems from scratch. And so they start to proceduralize. Well, this is how you do it. But as soon as you proceduralize, people stop thinking because they just follow those directions. And they're no longer forced to look all around them in the place between the swim lanes where there are problems. So that's a very risky moment. So luckily we didn't have that moment. What we had was, we had our critical design review in May of 2020. It was the first virtual review that NASA had ever done. And we had to first convince them that we could do a virtual review and that it would be meaningful. So we had to put in place all these different, and then JPL shut down 100%, like a lot of places did. And we did not have several months of COVID margin in our schedule.
No.
We didn't have
really?
global
you didn't
pandemic.
Foresee that?
No, we just didn't no, it was a failure of margins. It was a failure of imagination. And then, of course, we have that additional terrible problem is that you cannot build hardware from home. You got to be there. And then we could only have a couple people in the place at a time. And we had all the cleaning. And then we didn't understand in the beginning that you weren't going to pass it with your fingers. There were all those moments that we all, we think back on it and we have sort of PTSD about it. But that's what we were going through at that moment. And the things that we did, we immediately put in place once and sometimes twice weekly all team meetings where we would tell everybody what was happening. And then we repeat it and add stuff to it. And we were constantly adjusting our schedule and thinking about how to make things easier and reorganizing who was doing what and just trying really hard to over communicate. We realized later that we should have immediately also started gathering data on how connected people felt and how much communications they were actually receiving. So then we could try new processes and see if it helped, instead of kind of doing it like scattershot as fast as we could think of ways to continue communicating. And the team was incredible. People really, really came through. But I saw the same thing happen from that really great study, Yang et al., where as soon as everybody went home from Microsoft, whatever it was, 20,000 people, they started studying communications. I imagine you've seen this paper.
Yep, I've seen this.
And and what they figured out was that your kind of degree one relationships, the people right in your team who you've known for a long time, they stay fine. Communications work great. That's no problem. But the teams become siloed from each other. So anybody who wasn't your immediate degree one colleague, those just fall away. And then you also can't onboard new people because they'll never get to know you. You have to be in person to onboard people. And so right away you get these stovepipes of teams. And so we're writing flight software over here, and over here, we're building interfaces, and those teams just are not connected the way they used to be. And so those are the kind of problems we absolutely ran into, exactly like in that study.
The biggest thing when it comes to virtual or hybrid teams that the lesson that I took away from COVID is just like everything has to be intentional.
Yeah.
Like the random connections, the overhearing of the conversation, since none of that happens, you're just not going to connect unless it's intentional. You're not going to reach over the divide because you have to program that in.
That's right. And then you need periods of time when you're in person. You need to see people face to face and be with them on some cadence that's right for your team, whatever that is. I was just reading today an interesting study that talked about how the difference between regular teams and kind of super teams, whether they're remote or in person, is that the ones that really outperform have got some quiet place for people to go work reflectively without interruptions. And so that's one of the reasons why sometimes working remotely and being at home can be better, because you have that quiet reflection time, but then you also have to have the time together.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic, Lindy. I didn't send you this question, so I hate to put you on the spot, but to end, I want to ask one final question about Psyche. If you had to think of what's the one question that you most want answered from the mission?
My number one question is the same as our top level one question, which is, what is it? It doesn't look like other objects in our asteroid belt from the data that we can get remotely. Maybe it's the part of a core. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a kind of really reduced material, a metallic material that's theorized, but no one's ever seen it. Now, I would love that. I would love for all the science that we talk about to be proven wrong when we get there and we find out it's something completely different. That would be the thrill of a lifetime.
I got to tell you, I'm just imagining that meme from that old History Channel show with that guy with the crazy hair going, "It's aliens."
I get asked that with different degrees of seriousness depending on who's in the audience. And then I just, my favorite moment was this guy stands up and he goes, really serious, really reflective. And he goes, well, it's not the Death Star because it's too small. And it's not the Death Star prototype because it's too big. So we can rule that out. I just thought, you're my kind of person.
That's perfect. Excellent. Well, Lindy, this has been fantastic. We will all be watching with you. Is there what's the next? So you just celebrated the 1,000 days.
Yeah.
You did the gravity assist. What's the next next milestone?
We had an epic Mars gravity assist. The excellence of these engineers blows my mind. We hit the place in space and time with less than a second off the optimal that we wanted to get this gravity assist. So we're working on some software updates, and then in the fall we'll start thrusting again, because the way these Hall effect xenon-propelled thrusters work is you just thrust for months and months and months and months without stopping. So we'll start again sometime this fall, and that'll be our final cruise up to approach in 2029. And so, and actually keep your eye out. End of next week, we're going to drop some more actually flyby videos from Mars. It's going to be amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Lindy, thank you so much. Look forward to chatting with you again.
Matt, thank you very, very much.